3 true random skinwalker encounters. The last one is crazy. Number 1. The long shadow driving alone at night is something I've always hated. It's not the dark that bothers me. It's the quiet. The way the world feels too still, too empty, like you're the last person left awake. I was on my way home from visiting my cousin, taking a long stretch of desert highway that cut through reservation land. No streetlights, no houses, just miles of dirt and shrubs under a sky full of stars. My headlights barely reached the edges of the road, and my radio had lost signal miles ago. The only sound was my engine and the occasional bump of the cracked pavement beneath my tires. That's when I saw him. A man, walking along the side of the road. I barely noticed him at first, just a shadow in my peripheral. He was tall, wearing some kind of long, dark coat that blended into the night. I should have just kept driving, but something about him unsettled me. Maybe it was the way he walked, slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. Then I saw his shadow. It stretched across the road, unnaturally long, reaching far beyond the glow of my headlights. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I realized the shadow didn't match him at all. It was moving differently, flowing almost, like ink spreading across the pavement. A chill crawled up my spine. I sped up, keeping my eyes on the road, pretending I hadn't noticed. But as I passed him, something in my gut told me to look. I wish I hadn't. His face wasn't right. His skin looked stretched, pulled too tight over his skull, his mouth slightly open, as if frozen mid-speech. But it was his eyes that got me. Completely black, reflecting nothing, like 2 empty holes in his face. And he was staring at me. I pressed harder on the gas. The road stretched out endlessly ahead of me, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept telling myself it was just some guy, some traveler who looked strange in the headlights. But that shadow, that impossibly long, shifting shadow, I couldn't explain that. Then my headlights flickered, just for a second, a brief sputter of darkness. And when they came back on, he was standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching, and my headlights landed directly on him. But now, something was different. His shadow was gone. He just stood there, staring, head slightly tilted, arms hanging at his sides like a puppet with its strings cut. My breathing was ragged, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't wait. I swerved around him, nearly losing control, and floored it down the highway. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him still standing there. But he was gone. Relief started to settle in, until I noticed something. My own shadow. The headlights cast it onto the road ahead of me. But as I drove, it started to change. Stretching. Growing. It twisted unnaturally, pulling away from me, moving against the light, and then, for the briefest moment, it turned its head and looked at me. I don't remember much after that. I must have driven the rest of the way in blind panic, because the next thing I knew, I was pulling into my driveway, lungs burning, hands shaking. I ran inside, locked every door, closed every curtain. But even now, I don't feel safe. Because every night since then, whenever I'm alone, I see it. My shadow, stretching just a little too far, waiting, watching. And sometimes, it moves when I don't. If you're enjoying so far, please like and subscribe for more. Number 2. The knock at the window. There are certain rules you follow when you grow up near the reservation. Never whistle at night. Never look into the trees for too long. And never, under any circumstances, open the window after dark. I never questioned it much as a kid. It was just something my grandmother always told me. If I asked why, she'd just shake her head and say, "Things listen when you make noise at night." I live in a small house, miles away from the nearest neighbor. It's quiet out here. Nothing but desert and the occasional coyote passing through. Peaceful during the day, different at night. The knocking started a few weeks ago. At first it was faint, a single tap at my bedroom window around midnight. I ignored it, figuring it was just the wind or a stray branch. But then it happened again. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. I sat up in bed, listening. And there was no wind that night, no trees close enough to touch the glass. My stomach tightened. The nearest house was over 5 miles away. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited. After a long silence, I finally convinced myself I was imagining things and forced myself to lie back down. But just as I was about to drift off, knock, knock, knock. I bolted upright, heart pounding. It was louder this time, closer. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the window. Nothing. Just my own reflection staring back at me. The desert beyond was pitch black. I told myself it was nothing and went back to sleep. The next morning I checked outside. No footprints, no signs of anything near the window. Just endless, undisturbed sand. The second night, it happened again. 3 knocks. Identical to before. I didn't move, didn't even turn on my light this time. I just listened. The sound sent a chill down my spine, like something waiting, testing me. I pulled the blanket over my head and waited until morning. The third night, something changed. I woke up to silence. No knocking. No sound at all. Relieved, I rolled over and checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. Then, from directly outside my window, "Let me in." It was my mother's voice. But my mother wasn't there. She lived in town, miles away, and she sure as hell wasn't outside my window in the middle of the night. I gripped the blanket so hard my knuckles ached. The voice came again, softer this time. "Let me in. It's cold out here." A sickening realization hit me. It wasn't just my mother's voice, it was almost her voice. The words were too slow, too careful, like something imitating her but not quite getting it right. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then, knock, knock, knock. I stopped breathing. The voice came again, closer this time, pressing against the glass. "Why won't you let me in?" I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. I just lay there, motionless, heart hammering against my ribs. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes? Hours? I kept my eyes shut, my body frozen. At some point, the knocking stopped, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found handprints on the glass. Too large for my mother's hands, and too many fingers. That was 2 weeks ago. I don't sleep much anymore. I keep my curtains shut, my doors locked. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. Not that I think it would help. Because last night, something changed again. The knocking didn't come from my window this time. It came from my closet. And this time it whispered my name. Number 3. The bone collector. I live alone. It's something I used to enjoy. The quiet, the freedom. My house is small, sitting on the edge of the desert, just outside the reservation. It's peaceful during the day, the kind of place where you can hear the wind whisper through the dry grass. But lately I don't feel alone. It started with the bones. I found the first one a month ago. A small, sun-bleached vertebra sitting on my doorstep like an offering. At first I thought it was just an animal dragging it there, maybe a coyote or a stray dog. I kicked it into the dirt and went about my day. But the next morning, there were 2 bones. A rib and a femur, placed neatly side by side on the porch. That time I hesitated. The arrangement felt intentional, like someone wanted me to notice. I checked my security cameras, but the footage showed nothing. Just the empty porch, the shifting shadows of the desert. I should have left then. The next day I found a skull, small, animal-like. Maybe a rabbit, maybe something else. But it wasn't just placed on my porch, it was positioned, sitting upright, facing my front door, watching. That night I locked every door, shut every window. I told myself it was just some animal, some weird coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. The knocking started a few days later. It came just after midnight. A single light tap on the window beside my bed. I froze. The sound was too deliberate, too careful, like fingers against the glass. My bedroom window faced the backyard, where nothing but open desert stretched for miles. I didn't move. Another tap, then silence. I lay there barely breathing, listening to the wind howl outside. When I finally found the courage to sit up and check, there was nothing there. Just my own reflection staring back at me. But in the morning, more bones. They were arranged in a pattern now. Circles, spirals, something almost like symbols. They stretched from my porch to my yard, leading toward my bedroom window. That was when I knew. I wasn't dealing with an animal. Something was watching me. I thought about leaving, packing up and staying with a friend. But fear does strange things. It convinces you to stay put, tells you it's just your imagination. That night I locked my doors again, placed a chair under the doorknob, and left every light in the house on. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the knocking came again. This time, it wasn't at the window. It was at the back door, software rhythmic, patient. I gripped the blanket, my body rigid. My mind screamed at me to check the cameras, to call someone, but I didn't move. Then, slowly, the door handle turned. Not shaking, not forced, just a slow, deliberate turn, testing the lock. I clamped a hand over my mouth, heart slamming against my ribs. The door didn't open. It couldn't. But something was out there. Something that wasn't an animal. Something that knew exactly what it was doing. The handle twisted again. Then, after a long pause, a whisper. "I know you can hear me." My stomach turned to ice. The voice was wrong, too thin, too stretched, like someone trying to mimic human speech but failing. I stayed frozen until the first light of dawn. Only then did I check the cameras. Nothing, no movement, no figure. But when I stepped outside, I saw them. More bones. Hundreds of them, laid carefully in a spiral around my house. I left that day, drove straight to my cousin's place and refused to go back. I don't know what it was. I don't want to know. But sometimes, at night, I wake up to a sound in the distance. A single, soft knock. And I know it's still looking for me. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos.